Hello and welcome to the Erin Cruz Show. Tonight we are live. We actually have a long time old world friend from the 2018 elections. We have Joseph Gertcher. You might see a little bit of glitches going on here. We're not sure what's going on, but we are going to plow through. We're going to get tonight's show going. We have a lot to report here from the state of California and a lot to talk about. Welcome back to the Erin Cruz Show, Joe.
Hi, Erin. Thanks for having me again. I think this is my maybe third time.
Yes, and we're so glad to have you here. You know, it's the great thing is the people who come on the Erin Cruz Show and all the people who watch the show realize that not everybody is crazy in the state of California. There are actually real people who live here.
Yes, there are, and there are good people too.
Yes.
It's just the state of, I guess California is a state of mind, so.
Yes. Yes. So, you know, okay, so we are actually live tonight, which is something that we have not done for a very long time. I'm going to just go ahead and take real quick break over here and look, Joe, so I can see who is out there and who is saying hello, and make sure that they all can hear us loud and clear. You know, it's something where we have had, gosh, I think we're well over our 100th episode, which is extremely exciting for us. And Patriots connecting, you know, that's the part that gets me, is that people get more and more interested. They realize that not everything is this super hype media nonsense that they see on the TV, and they can actually interact with people who actually care about the state of California and other places in the nation. But here's the deal, is only I can see what they're saying, so then I have to relay to you what they're talking about. But I think that that's important. So let's go ahead and take a look and see what our viewers have to say tonight, if anything. Wow, we have quite a few people online right now. It's Tara and the Fed says, hi, Erin, thumbs up. All is coming well through the stream. That's really great. I'm so glad that we were able to get on live because we have some great things to talk about. One of the things, Joe, we're going to be talking about tonight is the Peters situation. You see that? You see the sign behind Peters right now? Behind Joe?
Yep.
Peters, he ran for office. Right? And you guys, you were out campaigning, just doing the good work of the people, going out to local areas, doing kind of community outreach, low-key communication.
Knocking a lot of doors, shaking a lot of hands.
Right, but you were out at a street fair event, right?
Yes, yes, we had a street fair in Castro Valley, California, which is a great place to live if anyone wants to consider it. And we had an incident where a man rushed our booth shouting epithets about President Trump. Yeah, you know, it happened so quickly. It just really, you see all these things on TV, real crime scenes, and they say, gosh, it all happened so quickly. Well, it does, yeah.
Before you knew it, I mean, here you are having a good day out in the town, meeting people, talking with individuals, and then all of a sudden this charged person comes up angry about the president. Now, he pulled out a weapon, right? Well,
at our table, he smashed a cup and threw some things around. And then my companion here, Rudy,
who was running for Congress, by the way, last year.
I was running for Assembly, and he was running for Congress. Rudy took off after him down the street, saying, you're not going to get away with this, and caught up with him, tripped him. Former military man, Rudy knows, you know, how to do a good move on somebody and stop him, and then the guy pulled out a knife.
Wow.
Luckily, the switchblade did not open, I have to say, but he was clearly holding it up like this, and threatening Rudy. So,
wow. And he was apprehended, and you were telling me that there was a hearing on Wednesday.
Well, this happened in September, and local police caught the man. They were very good, and the local Alameda County prosecutors charged him with felony assault with a deadly weapon. And we finally had what's called the preliminary hearing on Wednesday this week. So what that means is as it turns out, the prosecutor and the defense attorney get together at that day and try and negotiate some kind of a settlement before allowing the judge to move on to a trial, which would probably have been some months in the future. So Rudy was okay with the plea deal that they worked out. The man did no contest plea to one of the charges against him, which was reduced to a misdemeanor.
So wait a minute. So it was a felony reduced to a misdemeanor, or was it a? I mean,
yeah, it's a felony reduced to a misdemeanor. So as I understand these things, there are very narrow nuances in the law as to what constitutes a threat, an assault, an attack, and so on. So I think the prosecutor probably always charges a bit higher so that he can negotiate it down and still come up with something. And,
right. But my concern is this. This guy flew off the handle about our president to two individuals who are putting themselves out there on the line, putting themselves out there in the community to do community work, people, just regular everyday people, and he was hostile towards you, not in his right mind.
Right.
If you will.
We had nothing at our booth that would indicate a connection to President Trump. Not
right.
that we don't support the president, but we're just running for office here. We didn't have any MAGA hats, and
but even if you had, I mean,
yeah.
Quite frankly, I'll be honest with you. In my community, if somebody went off the handle like that, be it a MAGA hat or an Obama shirt, that's not balanced. It doesn't seem to me to be somebody in their right mind. It's just a concern that, for me as a mother, as a woman, as a community member, to have these individuals, running about causing and wreaking havoc at local events like this and then getting off with a misdemeanor. I guess it's a plea. He agreed to it, and everybody, Rudy Peters is fine with it. It's just, for me, I am tired of seeing criminals get the short end of the stick and not being held accountable for their crimes in the community, and the community having to feel the burden of those criminals out in their wake, in their midst. I'll be a little passionate about that because I think it's a trend. It's not.
Yes,
he's not the exception.
The law is inscrutable to people who do not practice it, and it is hard to understand how these things work. One of the mitigating circumstances is that the fellow had been drinking just a beer in the street festival, and it was claimed that he was an alcoholic, and so part of the sentencing is that he undergo alcoholic counseling. Not merely attending AAA Alcoholics Anonymous meetings, but actually some kind of
a program.
Yeah, right.
Well, and I'm not, and I'll be again honest with you. I'm not opposed to certain individuals receiving treatment, because I think that's part of the problem is that individuals aren't getting the appropriate type of care or support systems or other types of things to help rehabilitate those individuals who might be going through some sort of an issue like that. It just, to me, it seems so off the hook.
It was disconcerting because there was no indication. We had a very good day. Rudy made a lot of good points. People agreed with him, and I think would come around to actually consider voting for a Republican.
Right.
But then this guy just comes out of nowhere and charges at us. That was what's scary.
Right.
Really. Because why would it happen again? In the East Bay here, you're used to meeting people who say they've never met a Republican before. I've had that happen to me up at Berkeley, for example. Faculty members would say,
well,
"Oh,
naturally
I've never
so.
met a Republican," you know.
Right, naturally so, but even if they hadn't met one before, or maybe they didn't know they had met one before, or they hadn't recognized that what a Republican looks like you and me and many, many millions of other people here who live in the state of California, at least 4.4 million, I think that's how many voted for Trump, you know, I think that they're just normal people. So
Yeah.
to try to wrap my head around why somebody would want to be so hostile and angry at you when maybe they didn't even know what party you were with. You were simply somebody out there politicking, if you will.
Right.
So, you know, it's something that I think people need to give more credence to, and or even recognize. Is just that I don't like to use the word tolerance, but let's not be intolerant. You know, I mean, let's really try to hear people out and allow people that space to be active in their community, and reach out to the community.
Well, this was a concern after the sentencing. The hearing took the better part of a day by the time the court actually gets around to it. And then afterwards, the assistant district attorney took us aside, and we had a good number of people, Republicans, present from the local Women's Federation, the Women's Republican Club. They showed up.
Good.
And lent support in the courtroom. So that was clear. And then the DA came and spoke to us, and we expressed to him our concern, what you've just been mentioning, that people have to be able to practice their freedom of political speech without being frightened of this kind of behavior.
Right.
I think to Republicans, we're sort of tuned in of the kind of activism that goes on, particularly in this area in Northern California. I was surprised that the district attorney wasn't aware of it. We all
didn't play tune to the fact that he might have been aware of it.
Well, that's right. We mentioned the event in the Antifa or whatever up in Berkeley, where the fellow was punched in the face, and he said, well, that would be handled by his office, by the county DA, but he didn't know of the specific incident. So I thought that was surprising.
Very interesting.
Yeah, it's been headline news, right? At least on Fox.
Nationally, people are aware of this, and somehow the DA there has no idea what's going on in his own office?
Yeah, well, it's a very large county, so there's at least 2 major offices.
But you think that if a story made national headlines, that you might be aware of it?
Yeah,
perhaps.
You would
if it was in your desk, in your office, or in your even in your building, it might have been something. Oh, did you hear what case we have? You know, but some of these things are politically charged, so maybe they don't want to acknowledge it.
He's handling one of these cases, so you would think he would be aware of similar incidents going on.
Right.
Well, anyway.
Well, you know, what I'm happy about is that justice is served, so to speak, that you're a part of the process, that you've seen how this all has shaken out, and that you're not ashamed or in any way tilted by it, that you are proud to be able to come out and talk about this, about something happening in your community, and communicate with others about what's going on, because this is what's gone on for far too long in the Republican camp, so to speak, where people aren't speaking out about what's going on.
Yes, right.
And they're not talking about the issues, and that's only harmed us as a body. So this, for me, is really great to see that you're politically engaged, you're involved, you're watching the full process of everything that's going on in your community, and you're an active participant. So that's great. So
I got to tell you a story, though.
Okay.
Not the story we mentioned earlier, and even so, I'm walking into the DA's office, and it's a beautiful new building, brand new, and in front of us on the wall there are 3 pictures of the local Democratic congressman, the local Democrat, or this United States senator, another Democrat, and as it turns out, another Democratic congressman from Southern California. So I say, wow, why are all these federal officials there? Is this a federal building? And the guy explains, no, these are people who used to work at the county DA's office, and we just put their pictures there. Now, these were the biggest photographic pictures I have ever seen. They were,
they weren't an 8x10 glossy?
No, they weren't. The way you always see the little picture of the president.
Sorry. I had to. They weren't an 8x10 glossy with a little signature across the front.
Yeah, no, not that. This was a big picture. All three of them. Okay.
Wow.
And so I'm wondering. Well, there have been some famous Republicans from this area too. For example, ever hear of a guy named Earl Warren? He was the district attorney here, and then he went on to become Supreme Court chief. Mm-hmm. And Edwin Meese, who was the Attorney General under Ronald Reagan. So maybe we need to write a letter to the district attorney and suggest that some other pictures could be put up there.
I would have to say that might be something that should be considered by the community members as being done, because my guess, I'm not a psychic, but my thought would be that all of you guys paid for that.
Right.
The funds came from somewhere, and I don't think they just probably pulled the pictures out of their side offices. Many times these things are commissioned, if you will. So, it's worth asking, because I think it's important that equality be equality. We don't want the wrong message to be sent that Democrats rule the world over there in the northern part of the state. So now, talking about Democrats ruling the world in the northern part of the state or the southern part of the state, we as Republicans had a really, really dynamic event just, a week and a half ago, 2 weeks ago, Cagop convention, and we had a shift in power. You were a part of that. You were a delegate, right?
As a candidate in the general election, I'm allowed to attend the state party. Actually, most people who belong to the Republican Party never go to a convention, whether it be state or presidential. So I didn't even know how this works, but if you run for office, then you get to go. And I even got to name some people to be delegates myself. So it was quite interesting. When I got home, my wife didn't attend, but she said for a couple nights there I was having nightmares every night.
Oh, no. Oh, goodness. Well, it was quite the experience. And for those of you...
eye-opening.
Yeah, it was eye-opening. So for those people who might not be aware, and maybe you're new to the Republican Party, maybe you're just getting into politics, or you're not that deep involved and you don't understand how the process works, there are, in the state of California, there are, over 4 million registered Republican voters. Of those 4 million voters, there are about there's a little bit more than 1,200 delegates, which are individuals who are appointed by a certain process, by the party structure, to be able to participate in the convention and vote on certain measures, bylaws. Obviously, there was this Cagop chair, vice chair, secretary, treasurer, all of those elections that had happened. These delegates participate in that process. But it's not just the delegates that can participate, because even registered Republicans can go to convention and participate as a viewer. Like a fly on the wall, almost literally, because you're kind of in the corner of the room. But you can watch and see what's really going on in convention, in the process of the Republican Party, and kind of see if that's something that you want to become more and more involved with. In fact, some of the people that I do know that were on the flies on the wall, so to speak, watching this process, said, I need to get further involved because I can't believe what I witnessed. But that's how that works, folks. And now we're going to ask Joe one very good question about what he participated in terms of the Cagop chairmanship, because there were a couple of candidates up, right, Joe?
Yes, there were. This was the one chance that the rebels might have had to take over the party. I don't know how it works in other states, but in California you have the establishment and you have the rebels, and they're going back and forth. Because there were so few people who won elections in November, that means that the party electeds, they're called, did not appoint as many delegates as they have in the past. So there were a larger number of delegates who get in because they're appointed by their party chairman or whatever.
Right.
So there was a good chance of unseating the establishment candidate, who was, as they tried different establishment candidates and finally came up with one. So the leader is a woman named Jessica.
Mm-hmm.
But there were two opposing candidates, a fellow named Travis Allen, who you certainly have heard of. He's run for governor.
Mm-hmm.
And then a party activist named Stephen Frank.
Mm-hmm. Which is, Stephen Frank, for those people who don't know, very much supported by the Tea Party groups and other affiliated groups. As is Travis Allen, he also is supported by many grassroots organizations and fellow patriots. On the ground, conservative voting record. I think you and I have talked about this
Yes.
a lot, and I've talked about it on the show, that Travis Allen really has the conservative backbone, 99% CRA, California Republican Assembly voting record.
Yes.
That means 99% of his votes were consistently conservative. His action said he is a conservative while he was up in the assembly. And Steve Frank, obviously, he's a conservative. His activism, his work is traditionally grassroots-oriented, liberty-based. And it's interesting to see these two groups, because I don't know if you saw it, but I saw interesting information come out. They joined forces in the end.
Yes, well, it's an elimination ballot. So the first ballot, you have 3 people. If nobody gets 50%, then it goes to a second round and they drop 1. So the hope was that one of the rebels would get into the second round, and then they would join forces and vote out the establishment candidate.
Right,
and,
right.
You know what happened.
Right.
So
well, we'll just say what happened. Jessica Patterson took the chairmanship on the first round.
Right.
It was seen as a success by many in the room, as can be witnessed in many of the videos online. And I think that what I have said to everybody is that no matter who won, we have an uphill battle.
Yeah. Well,
we do as a party. We have an uphill battle. It's just a matter of what that battle was going to look like and what it was going to consist of, really. Because each one of the candidates brought something to the table. Unfortunately, as we know with Hillary Clinton, money can't buy your love. I mean, in terms of the voter anymore, you can have all the money in the world, as it seems, and still people aren't buying into that political nonsense anymore. So we're going to have to be very savvy about working with Jessica and the people who are in the party, because we are the party. This is what it comes down to. There are more of us than there are of them. And obviously with over 4 million Republican voters, we are the party. We need to take action, and we need to put pressure on the party chair, vice chair, and other people in the organization to be able to serve us, to help us to be able to go out into our communities and do the good, hard work. But it is difficult because the party, if you will, that body was split.
And it still is split. Listen, I have to tell you, I come from the Midwest, where they have this concept of Wisconsin nice and all that, and I just couldn't believe what I saw. I was in the convention, and there were a whole bunch of supporters of Jessica, and every time her name was mentioned, they would jump up and scream really, really loud and wave signs about. And someone pointed out to me that these were just paid proxy holders. They weren't real delegates. They were someone who had been made a delegate, gave them a proxy, which means they vote for that person, and then they were paid to attend the convention. And I know that's true because as soon as Jessica was done being nominated, this whole crowd of her supporters, paid supporters, pulled out. And I looked around behind me, and all of a sudden there were all these empty seats back there. from the young people leaving the room. It was really distressing. And after all the money that was spent, Jessica won by 4%.
By 4%, right.
Which was 50 votes.
Right, 50 votes, 4%. Now, the part that got me was some of the resolutions that were, or I don't know if you'd call them resolution, but some of the things that were voted on. There's actually...
Bylaw changes.
Yes, bylaw changes. So, some of the things that were voted on, one of them actually was interesting, and it would have put a cap on the amount of proxies and times that you could miss convention while you're a delegate. I thought that was interesting. That vote, to me, was probably even more interesting and intriguing in that entire process than the vote for the CAGOP chair.
Yes, actually, I thought that was very interesting, too. It was sponsored, by the way, by Harmeet Dillon.
Who also endorsed Jessica Patterson.
Yeah, which was a real shock to a lot of people, because from her appearances on Fox News, a lot of people have a high opinion of Harmeet. And anyway, she gave an endorsement of Patterson at the convention. But her idea was to just limit the number of proxies that a single person can hold to one. I actually was holding 2, so I violated that.
Well, if that were to have become an actual amendment to the bylaws, you were within your right during this convention to carry 2. I just want to make that clear for people. I don't.
What that would have done, it would make it more expensive to pay people to come in, because you'd have to find twice as many to hold the same number of proxies. You'd have to, and then the other thing was to limit the number of times that you can give a proxy out to just once per the cycle during which you're a delegate. So I'll be a delegate for 2 years, and that will cover 3 conventions. But Harmeet wanted to limit me to giving a proxy only once in that 2-year period.
In other words, forcing you to only be allowed to miss 1 convention.
That's
that
right.
means that you have delegates that are participating in the process and are not just going for the motions. That would be the ideal perspective there. I myself didn't have a problem necessarily with that. However, you know, and I think it would have cut down on some of this proxy nonsense that's been going on, or that reportedly has been going on, because I have not actually seen any evidence of it except for what I've witnessed personally.
No, it's there. I could hear the Jessica people around me as we were doing the electronic voting, and they were saying, okay, it's up to 1,100. All right, it has to get up to 1,200. There were actually something like 1,300 and some votes possible. So what that meant, that they sort of knew they had done a very detailed count, and they knew if they hit 1,200, then they would have a majority. And then, surprisingly enough, they hit the magic number, and the chairman cut off voting at that point. So it just looked too prearranged to me. Not happy about that, I have to tell you.
Well, you know, what's important is that, and necessary to say, is that at convention we did see something. We saw a very large group of people attending on the sideline, watching and witnessing what really goes on in the convention. And after going to convention and then speaking to some people after the fact, they're now wanting to get really involved in their local county party and wanting to become part of this process. And that, to me, that's encouraging. These are the good things that come out, I mean, in terms of the process and allowing people to participate. And I would like to encourage you out there, if you haven't been involved in your local Republican Party, get involved. If you don't like what you're seeing, what you're hearing, get involved. You are the CAGOP. You are the GOP. Now let's get to work and take action locally. You know, Joe, I think that we talked in our pre-interview. You don't know that you will be running again, but certainly I don't see you shying away from politics anytime soon. What's next for Joseph?
I'm sure I'm looking at other ways to become active, certainly staying active in my local county.
Right.
And we'll see what can be done there, because really at the county level as well, you can work to try and make it more democratic. I should mention, by the way, that if you do
by what you're saying, make it more democratic, people have a very unbalanced view of the word Democrat versus democratic. We want to make sure that you come across correctly there, that the process is respected.
There's ways to fight the establishment in your local party apparatus as well, and they're there, rhinos or whatever.
Right.
I should mention, if you want to attend a state convention and have some kind of closer tie to it, you can always find a delegate and ask them to appoint you as an associate. And that gives you privileges to actually go onto the floor where all the speeches and the signs are being waved. And I think you have to pay another $50 to get floor privileges or whatever, but it's worth doing that because then you can participate in everything except vote.
Right.
So consider that associate. Anybody who's a delegate can name you an associate.
Right, right. And again, it's just being part of the process and participating because, one of the things that has been taken away is the electronic voting has now taken away that human element of, I think, accountability. There is secret vote, no transparency, or little, if you will. And it's important to have people looking on and participating. And maybe not the same players.
Yes, right. Always.
Yes.
Always good for transparency. You don't know what those little gizmos are doing. When you walk, so the voting is done all electronically.
Yes.
And that's on amendments and on the candidates and the whole thing. When you walk in there, there's just a big table full of these little white, they look like TV remotes. And they say, oh, yeah, okay, take one, And I'm thinking, oh, well, can I take two? Can I take three? If I sleight of hand, can I reach in and grab one when you're not looking? It just, I'm sure probably nothing bad happened, but you just kind of wonder. And then can you trust the company that is actually providing these things?
Well, my concern actually was this, is that every electronic gizmo, if is the word you said, gizmo. Every electronic machine that you had, it has a serial number on it. It has a transaction number on it. It has some sort of a tracking on it. So as they said, for the private votes, they said, clear the machines,
Right.
I'm thinking, my late husband was an electrical and computer engineer. He would have just laughed his head off and said, do they think that these people are stupid and that none of these transactions can be actually tracked?
Exactly.
I mean, certainly maybe they're not in their system the way that perhaps the other ones are, to be recorded exact and actually say who voted for what and have your name right by it. But knowing how you voted previously with that corresponding machine, it's not difficult to say how this information was recorded, that I'm sure to, in the back room, figure this out. But not saying that the GOP is that corrupt that they would actually go look at that and find you and hunt you down and say, hey, you voted for so-and-so. But my point is that, let's just not be fooled into thinking that these things can't be tampered with, they can't be manipulated, and human accountability, human interaction, I believe it's a necessary evil. It has to remain a part of our process, and to give it over to machines is just risky.
Well, I think an amusing event that occurred at the convention, one of the other bylaw changes was to allow everyone who is a central committee member in the county to be a delegate at the convention. So in your county, you probably have maybe around 40 to 50 people who are elected to the local council of the Republican Party. And very few of those people will ever get to a state convention. So the idea was, make them all delegates. If they want to come, let them. So this was very controversial. There were speeches about, we can't have so many people. So finally a guy gets up and says, I'm from Texas. We have 10,000 people at our convention. So what are you sissy Californians worrying about?
Well, when you have too many people, it becomes very difficult to control. I mean, especially when you have decentralization is a real big problem. You know, we saw what happened to Rome when it centralized. It can be very great for some things, but it also can burn down the house. You know, decentralization, like this gentleman is probably pointing out about Texas, you have a lot more volume, but probably a greater deal of balance because there's a lesser ability to manipulate or control the body, which means that it's probably, or more likely, genuine information that's getting through.
Right, and we are the largest political state party, I understand, in the country because of the size of California. Even though Republicans are a minority here, they're still larger than any other state party.
Yeah. Well, I just would like to see more people get involved. And I'm so glad that you were able to get involved and stick your fingers in there. And I hear that, you know, you're working on some other measures to help bring more balance to the party structure. So that's good.
Are you hinting at me to introduce another topic?
Well, you're working on some interesting ideas. I think that could benefit the party.
Yeah. So in California, the way things work is it's a very big state, but it all comes down to really a handful of counties where most of the people live. That's the interesting thing at the convention. I met people who lived in counties that had 19,000 residents. You know, just imagine that. Right. I know unincorporated areas of this county that are bigger than that.
Right.
But anyway, these 8 large counties, they all have a central committee for their local party structure. And when the state legislature set these things up, they did it in a very unusual way that apportions the same number of central committee members to every state assembly district. Now we're getting into the weeds. But you see what that means is sometimes a big county has a little tiny piece of another assembly district that is mostly in the county next door. So you end up with vastly disproportionate numbers of Republicans in these assembly districts, and yet they all get the same 6 representatives on the central committee. So it's not really fair to a lot of the people in the county. And
that's what's important to note right there is because representation in the state of California on multiple levels is an issue, especially when we're talking about the minority groups. If you want to say minority groups, Republicans are a minority group, if you will, to the 7+ million Democrats that are registered to vote here. So, you know, I think that it's important to talk about because people need representation.
So, it turns out if you're in a smaller county, then they do have proportional representation across the districts from which committee members are elected. But in these 8 large counties that really are the bulk of the population, for some reason, it's not proportional representation, which means that depending upon where I live, my representation on the local Republican Central Committee could be vastly different. I could be one of 15,000 in some part of the county or one of 7,000 in another part. So it's not equal representation under the law. And it would be, some of the counties actually noticed this and they fixed it, but there's a certain inertia there, and I think it would be a good idea just to fix it for all the counties, make it equal representation.
Uniform, right. Well, it's only proper.
Yeah, sure.
It's only proper. It's just a matter of getting the language down and getting it passed.
Right.
So,
exactly.
And making sure that the people have the power and the voice to be able to make that happen.
Yes,
because that's part of, you know, there are people in this state and many other states who are okay with status quo. And as we see that there are many people in the population who are not being served who are not having proper representation, or they're not, the certain individuals aren't looking out for the people that they're supposed to represent. And that has to change. And thank goodness we have technology and we can communicate the way we can now. We're not relying on just 10 News San Diego or 10 News whomever, you know, to be able to get out the word. But still yet, we need people like you to help in the process, and then people like me to help communicate the process, and then all of us come together to make the work happen. And it does start locally because, as you were saying, you're starting in your area. This is going to have to take a good number of individuals in each one of these large counties to be able to recognize there needs to be change.
Right. If you just get into the party at the county level, which is where most people do, it's actually very confusing to try and figure out how things really work and where your central committee members come from. And just off the top of your head, name all the state assembly districts in your county. Boy, that's a new one.
Right.
So it takes a lot of, but actually because of the power of the internet, it's fairly easy to gather the information and see how unequal the representation is. Just 20 years ago, it would have been an awful lot of work to figure out, but now I could do it in a day. Right,
right, right. Well, we're so glad you can do it in a day, and that you're willing to look at this and take this project seriously, because it's important. You know, I always like to talk about how some of the things I do are so mundane, and I put out these tweets or I put out these posts on Facebook, and I know it's not Sean Hannity, you know, wow, you know, oh my gosh, some of this stuff is mundane, but it needs to be done. It needs to be done, and the people who can do the work, they need the support of the people out there to get it done as well, you know, because it takes time, talent, and treasure. It's going to take all of these things to get it done, you know, and it's going to take a unified effort. It may not be sexy, it may not be beautiful, it may not be glamorous, but it's practical, and it's going to give us results in the long term, which is what we need to get California back on track.
Right. For example, the county chairs nominate a good number of the delegates at the state convention. If you had a more properly represented populace, then there might be a shift in balance toward the Tea Party, say, away from the establishment, and that would have made a big difference at the state convention this year. So these little things really do affect the very top of the party, and then that has an impact in Washington as well, because California carries so much weight. So it's something people should really consider. And I must say it's fun. I think the county parties can be a little bit dreary, but in many areas there are women's federations, Republican women's federations. They'll have programs as speakers. They tend to be sort of party insider type speakers. And then, of course, there are conservative groups. Up here we have the independent, what's it called, the Conservative Forum, I believe, in Palo Alto or Mountain View.
There are many, many organizations to get involved in, folks out there. Between the Federation of Republican Women, there's a new women's group that's opening up because the Federation is winding down in certain counties for the ladies. And then I think that there's your the California Republican Assembly. So there are different groups. There's the Impact Republicans. There's all sorts of, there's Tea Party groups. There, you know, I think it's just important we watch Liberty and we participate in the process and stay engaged within our communities. So that's where it's at.
Well, it's just a relief to be able to get together with some people who think the way you do. I mean,
especially you, right? You're in the northern part of the state.
After CNN and MSNBC, you know, Fox is not. I'm talking back to the TV too much. You have to get out and talk to real people, like I'm doing with you, and it helps an awful lot. And also, what it does, I think, is it forces you really to figure out what opinions you do have and not just parrot something. and
Right.
why you believe this and why you are in favor of that and opposed to this. It's very good exercise to get out with real people.
Right, it is absolutely a good exercise, but more than that, to get involved in the process, because people are sitting on their couches and they're yelling and screaming at they're yelling and screaming at the TV about the symptom. You know, they're seeing the symptom, they're seeing the illness. You know, we need to get to the root cause of some of these problems and make real and actual change in our communities, so that way we can see what comes to the top is a better life, you know, safer communities, stronger family units, you know, better infrastructure, less debt, you know, many of these different things that we all could benefit from. But we have to stop yelling and screaming at the TV and the noise and get down to doing some work, some of the more mundane work, maybe at the community level. So, and it's not that mundane when you get to meet other people who are like-minded and build relationships and be able to grow them and get involved.
But I will carry that a bit further, okay? And so another thing to do is to get out and meet groups that are not like-minded. So, for example,
the Sierra Club. Didn't you go to?
I'm a member of the Sierra Club.
Yeah.
The Sierra, all the people there are very nice, and they are just completely crazy. You cannot talk to them.
Did you just say the Sierra Club is crazy? Well, I mean, I've known some members.
To be a voice of reason. Eventually, they realize maybe I'm a Republican, some of them, but I'll just say, you know, do we really need to spend all that money when the Chinese are going to be burning coal anyway? I mean, how much good is this going to?
Right.
So we'll see.
Getting involved in the process, I do agree with you. Bring balance and sanity back to the conversation. Right. I think that the big exit out of some of these groups is not beneficial, because then they just are thugocrats. You know, they're big, powerful machines that. You know, how did the communists do it in terms of Hollywood and our televisions and everything else? They infiltrated it, and then now they pushed almost everybody out who they don't want in there. And pretty much all we have is Fox News, which is turning into faux news in some sense, because the brothers are, I mean, the family is so liberal leaning. I mean, and that's kind of our last stand in terms of media. Now we have new media, which is great. But my point is that we can't allow ourselves to be pushed out of these organizations. We have to take a stand. We are these organizations, so to speak. And, you know, I'm not saying that, you know, ACLU is 100% great and that you should be contributing to them, but you should at least be aware of what they're doing and be involved and know what they're doing in your community and engaging them and building relationships and networking. I know a lot of people who've done that over the years, and they have a good relationship with them, and actually they've gotten them on the right side of the fight, if you will. On a few cases, you know, but if we have no part in it, we can't complain, folks.
Right.
So,
yeah, well, it's kind of a laboratory to see some of these things happen.
Well, we're just glad you're part of the process. You're a brilliant mind, and you've definitely done great things in terms of running for assembly, going through that process, watching all the vote count, coming on the Erin Cruz show, sharing with us about that process, and then now sharing with us about the convention. We just can't wait to have you on the show again to talk about the next iteration.
Installment.
Yes, absolutely.
There's in European literature, there's a concept called the Bildungsroman, which is a person who wanders through the world. A Bildung is a picture, and you see, and not Roman is a novel, and you see all these different episodes. And I've seen the League of Women Voters, the Sierra Club. I've seen how they count votes at the Register of Voters. I see what happens on election night. I see the convention. So I'll continue to. Maybe I'll learn about writing platforms for the state party. That should be interesting.
That would be very interesting, one I'm sure you're well charged with in terms of your expertise. So we can't wait to hear what's next for Joseph Gertcher. Again, thank you for being on the Erin Cruz show. Thank you for being a participant in California politics. We know it's a swamp, and we're just so glad you have your waders on to go through there and help us drain it.
Thanks for having me, Erin. It's a pleasure.
Oh, thank you so much. God bless you and take care.
Take care of yourself.